Live from the SABC's Auckland Park studios, welcome to this midweek edition of the Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvoko, and on the show this evening, an escalating national water crisis is demanding Minister Senzo Mchunu undivided attention. At about the same time, some of the branches of a divided ANC are asking him to stand for the most hotly contested position of party deputy president. What's it gonna be, the party or the state? He's right here in studio to take us through his thoughts. We remember the day 45 years ago when the apartheid regime closed down a number of newspapers, banned several organizations, arrested editors, journalists and activists. This year's commemoration coinciding with a rather disturbing fact or news that freedom of expression in the region is on the decline, while South Africa has slipped 3 places on the index. Those conversations in tonight's episode of the Watchdog, which starts right now. Several of the country's busiest and most populous regions and cities are facing a renewed water crisis. Households, businesses, hospitals, schools, universities have been going without water in what some now term water shedding. One of the strangest things, though, is that it's not because these places have run out of water. In fact, many of the dams are 93% full. My guest is ultimately responsible for ensuring that the situation doesn't deteriorate into a national crisis. And that's Water Affairs and Sanitation Minister Senzo Mchunu. Minister, good evening. Thanks very much for your time.
Good evening, Vuyo, and good evening to the viewers.
Have you been able to put a finger on it? I mean, what is going on? Why parts of Gauteng in the state that they are in, despite the fact that the dams are 93% or so full?
You're quite right. Many of the dams are more than 90% full. The lowest, if I could call it that, would be around the 40s. What has been happening in the country, which the consequence of which we are now going through, is that the Department of Water and Sanitation has been focusing mainly on water resource management. That is building dams, managing dams, and then dealing with bulk water to cities and whatever bulk water is required, even through water boards. Now, the responsibility of reticulating water has always been the purview of municipalities, the metros, the districts, all of them called water service authorities. There's been that difference all the time. Now, with the situation of municipalities deteriorating in terms of capacity, which is something that they themselves say, that we don't have capacity, it would have been expected that they can't have less capacity or declining capacity to do or to render basic services and then succeed without anything showing on water and sanitation. It would cover as well. It would impact on water and sanitation, and therefore here you have a combination of the department on the other hand, on one hand, having forecast until last year when we said let's not focus on one area, that is water resource management. Let us also focus and even prioritize water services management, which is reticulation. Let us not, there's no one, there are no people in any street that would demonstrate and say, we want to drink water from a huge pipe. We have never seen that. They just want water. They want to drink water from a
Yeah, because I mean, the reasons people are being given, residents are being given for these things like burst pipes, broken pumps, faulty valves, which will say these are maintenance issues, and we shouldn't be dealing with these things. We should be taking these things for granted, and the focus should rather be, on how to avoid day zero. How do we avoid a national crisis? Because we all know that we're getting less and less water over time. The quality of our water is deteriorating, and that's what we should be focusing on, and not on valves and on pipes. Yeah,
definitely we're focusing on that. Just touching on the quality of water, we started doing measurements of both wastewater and drinking water. We call the wastewater, we refer to that as green drop, which we did, and we got last year, and we got the first results in March this year, showing us the quality of our what wastewater treatment plants are producing all over the country, and challenges that need to be done. We've at the same time started with measuring the quality of drinking water, which we call blue drop. Results will come out next year in March. It's something that had stopped for a couple of years, 3-4 years, and we said, no, there's no other way to measure water. This is the way. That's number one. Number two, we have shifted the attention of the Department of Water and Sanitation, successfully so, to say shift your attention from being exclusively on bulk to also take on board reticulation. Make this a one value chain. Don't cut it, and especially with deteriorating municipality capacities and so on, we've got to go down there, we've got to be interested. And we were doing this today, and on infrastructure, interestingly, we spent 2 hours before I came here looking at 2 cities. I'm not going to talk about it now, those cities, until we contact them, because at least on one of them, we now know exactly the state of their infrastructure, both water and sanitation. It's a question of not paying attention to your maintenance side of things over time. Some of them, and I could see that there are so many pipes that are no longer fitting the situation now, either because they're small, but also because they're the old type, or the kind of pipes for water and sanitation that on aging, they would just crack and then start spilling whether it is water. So we now have to look at that. It is true. We have to focus now, shift our focus even to infrastructure. But remember this, that's not our responsibility as water and sanitation. But at the same time, because of the state of infrastructure in the country, it is putting us under the bus, because no matter how much water we can bring to the door of the municipality, if they don't have infrastructure to lose.
Which is exactly, I mean, what we're talking about.
People will come back.
What the Southlands are keen to hear, from you is, yes, that may well, structurally, that may well be where things are, and this may well be the problems of aging infrastructure, but also perhaps skills and competency level and all those things. It's whether there is actually light at the end of the tunnel. Now that you've taken the decision to say, let's go beyond what is supposed to be, our core mandate to addressing these issues, but at the end of the day, the responsibility lies with you. And as I said right at the beginning, people will say, if we can't deal with these small problems, instead of focusing on the bigger problem about whether we will have water, given the situation, what we're encountering, that we're getting less and less water, and the quality is also deteriorating. Is the light of that? In other words, will we be able Is there a plan? Is there a way we're going to deal with these problems that you've already identified? Now, let's not restate them. Let's talk about whether.
Yes.
There's a
the light
solution.
is no longer in the tunnel. The light is visible now out of the tunnel.
So soon, these erratic stoppages where people suddenly, and there's not even communication. This is the other part of the problem people are complaining about. You know, they don't get told. You know, at least with an ESCOM, someone says, okay, you won't have lights between this hour and that hour. You prepare adequately for that. They don't have that. The what are supposed to relief measures, a truck, we're told, arrives days later, and people have to stand in long queues, and even the methods that are being used to give these people water is not. Nobody seems to be able to vouch for the state of the water, because it goes through so many people and things. People are not even sure whether it's safe to drink some of the water in certain areas, given the way it gets disseminated.
Let me start with communication. Let me make an example of Gauteng, where Johannesburg and Tshwane in particular, but also affecting the other metros, all of them, Citibank, Westland, and Ekurhuleni. We recently had a meeting and we identified all these problems, but in the context of the difficulty that has just emerged, which they are dealing with together with us. In the meeting, we took a number of resolutions. One of the resolutions was that we are establishing a water room. And we deliberately called it a water room instead of a war room, because it has to deal with water. And one of the specific things that they're going to deal with is communication. Whenever there is a hitch, whether it is repairs, whether it is a rupture of a pipe, people must be informed. They deserve to be informed. And especially if it's possible, before time, a day or two before, so that they prepare. Now, gone are the days now where we will say, no, they will see, we will fix that. Don't worry us. We have to inform the citizens, because they are the ones who are injecting money via various taxes that make cities run and so on, and therefore we have to respect them. So we spoke about that. It is addressed via the war room. All communicators, including our communicators at DWS, are going to craft a strategy and a way of communicating whenever and so on, and we'll have a convener. It's convened overall by Rand Water. And number two, they are going to assess. In fact, there was an assessment of the metros here in terms of infrastructure as early as 2017. It is at various stages of implementation, and they were going to resuscitate that, and they follow that, because it is clear, and we agreed, no one contested it, that they lose water. So even if Rand Water can abstract more water from the valve, even if they push more water from their treatment works into the cities, the problem is that they lose quite a lot of water.
In fact, I mean, I remember we're having this very same conversation. I think you were in Nelson Mandela Bay at the time. Well, they were staring day zero in the face.
And that's 6,000.
Exactly. They were losing so much water. And then, of course, the same problems of valves and things and repairs and maintenance also came to. And up until now, we've been talking about these problems in Gauteng and so on. We're not even talking about hundreds of thousands of households across the country that are not getting water.
Yes.
You know, and your underspending department is far behind in terms of its targets, meeting the targets of, dealing with that backlog.
Let me pick up on infrastructure. I said it's no longer about light being in the tunnels, out of the tunnel. We can see it in one of the cities in the Free State, one of the municipalities in the Free State. We're in there. What are we doing? We are repairing 52 out of 56 wastewater pumps in that particular place. What are we doing? What else are we doing? We're fixing 11 out of 13 wastewater treatment works. What else are we doing? Fixing 1.5 kilometers of pipeline. This is infrastructure of the whole city, which has caused a lot of damage and a lot of spillage on a daily basis, including in the residential areas. We're cleaning that. Remember, we're cleaning in the Val as well. We're doing a lot of work there since July last year. We are doing unblocking. We are fixing all their main water treatment works, wastewater treatment works, and in some cases repairing the pipeline so that we make the system work. So it's something that we're doing already. And I'm saying we're assessing one of the cities. In fact, we're going to do 2. The other one, we received a report today. We're going to be engaging them very soon. It is going to be this month. So we've started getting into an area which otherwise was not necessarily deemed our area.
But what the Auditor General's office was telling Parliament is that if you look at the targets versus the pace at which things are moving, at the moment, the fact that, among other things, the department is underspending, it's going to take a very long time for this work to be completed.
Yeah, but remember these assessments, some of them are 2021, some of them 1920, 2021. I know as we speak, we are not at par with the number of months since the beginning of the financial year. We're a little bit behind. But what have we done? We have appointed a Director General there. We no longer have somebody acting, which has been one of the problems or challenges when we have too many people acting. And we have appointed all DTGs except one. We have appointed more than 21 chief directors. Now, this means that the functionality of the department, the capacity of the department, it means it's going to function on all cylinders. And we're beginning, this is going to make an impact. We have agreed with DG and CFO that come end of the financial year next year, we rather get told to have overspent. There's just no way we will, even today, we will overspend. We will underspend. We were talking with DG to say, your eye must be on expenditure, your eye must be on delivery, and then we get along. Because it can't be heard of.
And those are his KPAs.
Yes.
So you're putting your neck on the block, you're saying never again.
At the end of 2022, 2023, there's no under expenditure whatsoever. Because in the main of the reason that I've spoken about, that we are getting more and more into the terrain of water services, that is delivering water to the people. And in some cases it's smaller schemes, in some cases it is big schemes. There's not a single day I don't see a video or from one place to the other. Sometimes I get up to 10 people showing me how they are queuing, how they are desperate for water in one reason or the other, and phone calls, correctly so. And we agree with them that they should put us under pressure. They must make us accountable. We are fit for accountability, and we are confronting all these problems. But together with municipalities, where municipalities are coming on board as water services. I was quite happy with our meeting with Gauteng Metros. There was not a single difference amongst ourselves. There was not a single contestation. All agreed that, look, let's up our game. Each of them up their game. Let's cooperate. Let us make sure that water works so that we don't have day zero when our dams are full, including the Vaal River. The Vaal River Dam is full, and therefore there's no reason whatsoever.
Now, you have these big responsibilities, that you have to deal with, that matter to this nation perhaps more than, I would dare say, some of the party issues, that this period going into the ANC's elective conference poses. So you have this responsibility you're entrusted with. On the other hand, you have your comrade saying, raise your hand, we want you to be our deputy president. Now, when one looks around at what needs to be done, where this country is right now, one would say something has to give. I don't think that you should be focusing on both. We need your undivided attention right now on making sure that this country avoids day zero. This campaign over the next is going to take away your attention, and it's probably not even worth it, given just the sheer number of people who have raised their hand for the position of party deputy president.
What's your view?
I have mine. I'm asking the questions tonight.
Look, overall, I want to say this is one of the major challenges that we're facing as a country, we're facing as government, we're facing as the governing party right now: service delivery. Now, it doesn't require one person sitting somewhere, and it doesn't require one department in the Republic of South Africa. There are these things called frontline service delivery departments: water and sanitation, transport and roads, or housing or human settlement, and there are quite a few of those frontline. Even you can bring education and security, because those are daily issues that are affecting people on the ground. Now, so all of us there, working there, it's a question of undivided attention. The better thing is that what you are talking about, the conference at the end of the year, is an internal issue, not the external one, where we're competing with other parties. And therefore, there's no need for us to really, or anyone out there, to get over-worried about
they consume
attention.
A lot of time. They consume a lot of energy. And in the process, people develop or start having enemies or arch enemies. And then after conference, there's a spillover. People start being moved around, because of these political games that people have to get into, remove comrade so-and-so from this, because so that you create room for another person. And remember, all this is happening with a history, a particular history that we have, in this country, where people are being chopped and changed every now and again. Someone who's going to, let's just say, you win, right? Then you move to, say, become the country's deputy president. Now someone else has to come on, and then start getting to learn the ropes, start getting to know the place. They will be nowhere near when they start where you are, like at the moment. And the cycle continues, and that's part of the problem. It's part of what people talk about when they say what happens in the ANC then impacts, our lives, and often, in fact, more often than not, very negatively.
I would be quite surprised. Yes, let me start by saying this. Yes, internal democratic processes, the results thereof, as we have seen it in regions and provinces, it does have an impact, sometimes an impact even on efforts to deliver because of the outcomes of such conferences. But I would be surprised. Actually, I would be one of those people who would work against it. That in the middle of a term of government, just because of an outcome of internal processes of the organization, that is the governing party, you now must disrupt the term for any other reason other than just upping the game of delivery. But for instance, I would be surprised if, in fact, it's something that needs to be discussed and pronounced, that whatever happens, whoever gets elected to a position of deputy president, the first thing that they must not do is to start saying from Nazareth to Union Buildings, because there's absolutely no reason why. The road should go to the campaign, because we have a campaign in 2024. And when we come out of this conference, the most important thing for the organization, for the ANC, it will be 2024, which is promising to be quite a very tough contest, given the situation.
But go on.
Yes.
You've seen.
Yes.
The last two conferences, what has happened? People didn't finish their terms. Right? Or presidents, I should say. Yes. They didn't finish their terms. You've seen your provincial conferences. Undertakings are made, the night of the results, that nothing will happen. The next day, it's a different story. You've seen what has happened in KZN, and you've seen what has happened in the... I'm saying this is a norm. This is what people... We're talking about stuff we've seen, Yes. And let's take it beyond that. Let's look at the number. Look at the number of people who want to be ANC deputy president. It's a big number.
Yes.
Look back where you were 5 years ago,
yes.
we were contesting the position of Secretary General. Yes. It was just two people. But of course, we know what happened. We are not Secretary General of the ANC today,
yes.
which then brings me back to the question I partly asked at the beginning. That do you not think you'll serve the people of South Africa better by staying right where you are and focusing perhaps, on the rebuilding, the unity, and all of that stuff that the ANC is talking about, so that you are not lost, to the government,
yes.
that has to serve the people of this country. Also because, maybe I should say this as well, a country deputy president, largely ceremonial, truth be told. I mean, there's very little, anything that actually happens there. Whereas where you are now, you stand a chance of making a much greater impact on the people of South Africa. And you would, let's say, as a country deputy president.
Let's talk about the two issues at the same time. One, you are saying there's this practice of aftermath of conferences where there's either a huge shift of people and so on and so on. So even if you were to say, all right, let's so and so, not just me, me as well included, focus on what you are doing, and then this big shift comes, and then all of you anyway you get shifted around. Or even whatever. So that's always there, which I'm taking your comment that it is something that poses a challenge, and it's something from which we need to learn, especially in the short past where such things have happened, and then do something about it, something better, because we've learned and seen that it often comes at a huge expense for the organization and its future. But at the same time, let me put very, very close to this one, that yes, apart from that shift, you then agree to make yourself available, and then you go elsewhere. But firstly, I just want to say, there are many people in the African National Congress, very capable, very skilled, and available to do various tasks allocated to them. It's not just one person. But at the same time, I take your point. I have to concede it, that it needs to be done in a manner that doesn't destabilize service delivery. It doesn't destabilize whatever anyone would have accumulated in terms of familiarity with a particular portfolio and therefore doing it. That's why even today we're discussing how to stabilize public administration as opposed to executive authorities, that is ministers and so on. So their change shouldn't necessarily translate into change into executive management. We should stabilize it so that whatever happens at a political level, it doesn't necessarily affect. But I take your point. It may not necessarily be like you have become used to a particular portfolio and you are seeing your way through and you are making an effort and you are making progress. It may be better to retain such a person than starting, because it takes no less than 6 months to become familiar and to get into grips with a portfolio, and then you perform at a higher level. But all in all, put together, there are risks, but at the same time, there are things to do. Let me round off by your comment. Well, the position of Deputy President is not necessarily ceremonial. Yes, of course, it depends on the president allocating you what to do and so on. But look, there are a lot of challenges in the country. There are a lot of pressures, and these things do get reviewed, do get changed. And even under the current dispensation, under President Ramaphosa, which may make you conclude that way, is there's nothing ceremonial per se, because there's a lot of work that the Deputy President needs to do and is doing. It may not be a particular delivery portfolio like this one, but a Deputy President is number 2 in the country, and therefore you have a responsibility as allocated.
History has taught us otherwise.
Yes.
But let's leave that one there for now. How would you rate your chances, and if you're being put up for the position of Deputy President, who would you rather have as your president?
I would rather have a person chosen by the branches. There's that procedure in the African National Congress that when a season like this opens up, it is open for branches which are basic structures. They are the ones that are in electoral college. You may have your little wish.
What's yours?
Somewhere in your toilet, and then you say, "Hey, if."
What's yours right now in the studio?
Unfortunately, I'm not in that space at the moment. I'm not in that little room that I'm talking about. I'm here in the studio, and the main thing to say to you is that branches, and by the way, they are advancing on this process of.
Well, we have about a week. We have about a week
yes.
to know how exactly things are going. But what would you bring to the party? What would you do? And I mean, in that portfolio. To change the fortunes of your organization?
Well, half of it would come from the views of branches saying, we want you, and indeed, if its meal succeeds, then they will give you what they are expecting from because they are the ones who choose you. They are the ones who look at you and see what talent you have, what capacity and so on.
But you know the challenges facing the organization right now.
Then this is my other half. I believe at the moment we have 3 major challenges to speak about. The first one is economic growth. It has not been well on our or in that area, economic growth, and it has got 2 areas. First area is energy supply. We had to see whether I believe that you need adequate if not more, energy supply to energize your economy. And I believe that we could have done and we could be doing more than we have done and we are doing in that score. And in fact, there are these disruptions, load shedding and all of that. And is the least desirable in a situation where your economy has been ravaged by COVID-19, but was even before was at a low on a decline. But on the other dimension is spiraling unemployment. It is at a very disturbingly very high level. So these are the three parts of otherwise one jointed challenge that we have in the economic area. And then the number two is security. Just sheer security of the neighborhood, individuals, safety. There are concerns all over, but also bigger crimes, including corruption and fraud. That's an area of concern. And then there's number three, service delivery. These are the three major frontline challenges that we are facing. If anything happens at conference, it must be rejuvenation of those who will be elected and their preparedness while facing the campaign for 2024. But these matters need to be addressed, and maybe they are the ones that will determine what happens in 2024, and we'd rather focus on them because they are really key in terms of making the lives of the people of South Africa better than it is at the moment.
Well, best of luck on both tasks. Thank you very much for coming through this evening.
Thank you very much, Vio. Thank you very much to the listeners.
Who, of course, some in the ANC want to be their next deputy president. We'll be bringing these conversations over the next few weeks, right up to the ANC conference in December. After the break, reflections on the state of South Africa's media landscape. 45 years after the apartheid regime launched a horrific onslaught on the country's media outlets, journalists, and civic organizations. This year marks the 45th anniversary of what came to be known as Black Wednesday, a day in which, back in 1977, the apartheid regime silenced the country's media as well as activists around the country. It closed down several newspapers, among them The World and its sister publication, The Weekend World. Several journalists were arrested, including the editors of those newspapers. Others were banned, and 19 Black consciousness organizations were outlawed. This year's commemoration coincides with rather disturbing news. According to the 2022 World Freedom Index, freedom of expression in Southern Africa is on the decline, with South Africa slipping 3 places from the previous report. My guests for this segment are Stembiso Khuluse from the Right to Know campaign, who joins us on the line. And with me in studio is Nomshado Ngosinkulu from Media Monitoring Africa. Good evening to both of you, and thank you very much for your time. Nomshado, do we have much, if anything, to celebrate?
I think you mentioned the mere fact that we have obviously slipped places. However, looking at a continental perspective, we're actually still doing quite well. But it's alarming because it makes us look at certain things, you know, such as media sustainability, media credibility, the rise of mis and disinformation, all those different elements that play into ensuring that our media, number one, have the space, you know, to practice freely, but also knowing that they've got various barriers that they need to deal with, such as, you know, harassment against journalists. So there are quite, I mean, there are wins, but there are also areas that we really need to start looking into.
Stembiso, I mean, the Right to Know campaign earlier today said this day is a reminder that a critical and independent media is vital to challenging authoritarianism and speaking truth to power.
Yes, indeed, and thank you, Vio, for having us. You know, if you look from where we are coming from as a country, and look what is currently happening now, and look at the role that the media has played so far. Because when you speak about freedom of media, this is a fundamental principle, when it comes to communications, and it should be considered as a basic right when it comes to expression. And also, media, when it comes to our society, the independence of media is very critical, because it plays a very critical role when it comes to informing the public, because to a certain extent, media controls what people think of, it controls how people imagine things, it controls how people make decisions. So independent media, free from any, especially with us, with the work that we are doing as right to know, free from any intimidation, surveillance, control over government, or even businesses, because money now comes into play when it comes to media freedom. So as the Right to Know campaign, we look at the media freedom as a very critical and a right that should be protected, when it comes to South Africans.
Mm-hmm. Now, Nomsado, according to this International Press Freedom Index, 2022, South Africa's media landscape remains, and I quote, sturdy, diverse, dynamic, something that cannot be said about a whole lot of countries in our region and on the continent.
Reality is there are still journalists who are getting arrested. There are still journalists in prison as we speak, sitting here. There are still journalists who cannot go out their homes without obviously feeling safe or knowing very well that they're being surveilled. And I think we got to appreciate the journey that we've traveled as South Africa. And I think, the previous speaker mentioned that our media has shown that it's there to hold power to account, but most importantly, to mirror society, to reflect our society. But to see that other African countries can't easily go to, a rural area and give a mic to, a community member and freely speak on the issues that they're facing is really a concern. And hence for me, as much as, yes, we still have a lot of work to do, but being there as the only African country within, we're not looking from 0 to 50, is still, something to really pat ourselves on the back for.
Stembiso, we should pat ourselves in the back precisely because, no journalist or media worker has been killed, in this country in recent times. None are in prison because, of their work. Yeah,
it's a yes and a no, because even though we don't have journalists who've been killed, you don't have journalists who are in prison, but there are many ways to intimidate journalists. Some journalists have been fired for telling the truth. Some journalists, as my fellow speaker has said, some journalists have been surveilled. And surveillance is a very serious issue because it puts one under a microscope. So you can't do your job properly as a journalist. You can't inform the public properly as a journalist. If you are being intimidated, if your life is under threat, and also if you are being surveilled. Yes, because maybe we can say our democracy has matured, we've got a constitution, but in practice, is our media free from intimidation and surveillance? We can say we're not going to that extent to be so brutal when it comes to killing journalists or taking them to jail. But indeed, they are still under threat. They are under attack. Currently, there's a journalist who's in court. And we've received reports of journalists who have been surveilled. Their car has been bagged, even their phone. So that limits expression when it comes to media and the role that they must play in informing the public. And I think it's our duty as organization and community to make sure that we protect our media and we support the work that is being done by the journalists.
Of course, in spite of all the surveillance tappings of phones and intimidation at times, we've also been able to cultivate, what is now increasingly becoming a well-established culture of investigative journalism. We've been able, to expose a state capture, and it has helped our country perhaps steer us, perhaps, if not away, or it has at least, slowed down the progression to the kind of country many of us only a few years ago feared we could degenerate into?
I think, as mentioned, I think the harassment and the surveilling comes after that, because we've been robustly investigating, holding power to account. And through that, there's now an actual reflection of media actually getting into it. Media are looking into power, are holding power to account to say that, is this for the better good of South Africa? And however, unfortunately, through that, we are getting journalists online, on Twitter, being harassed for obviously, holding power to account. We have a journalist current right now in court, for holding power to account. So for me, it's a reflection that, number one, journalists are going to the meat of the story. They really are getting to a point of saying our role is to hold power to account and to ensure that, number one, we're protecting our democracy. And media at this current point are in the forefront of that. So knowing that we've gotten to a point where we need to start, and I really, really want to emphasize that we really do need to start addressing issues of online attacks, harassment, surveilling, in order for us to not find ourselves slipping down that index list.
Well, people will feel up. The one journalist who's currently in court, never mind, last kicks of a dying horse. It's not really a reflection of how the establishment thinks or does things.
I think also it emphasizes the role and responsibility that those that have large followings have. Because if somebody of high following goes to Twitter and starts attacking journalists, how many individuals are those now looking at media as, we don't really need them, or it's okay if they go through this? And I think that's where we need to start reestablishing the reason why media is there, and the reason why we need it, and the reason why we need to start rebuilding that relationship between society and media to become one.
I was telling you, so just in line with what I was saying earlier, your organization reminded us of this morning, that a day like this, should serve to remind all of us that to challenge, authority, to speak truth to power. There is a sense, for example, that in situations like what we're seeing in Parliament, how the EFF, for example, was being treated there. And I remember having one activist here on the program talking about it recently, that we tend to look the other way, or we pick and choose, who to be behind, and the same argument has gone with regard to how we report on or cover, the president. We tend to be a lot more, soft with him, whereas we are very robust and very tough with his opponents. Your thoughts from your observations?
Yeah, from our observation, we have noticed that, and with some media house, I think some journalists or some media house are afraid to challenge power with bad experience that has happened. Also the influence, a person like the president sitting in that office, he's got a lot of influence over many things. So at some instance, we will see that the way that the coverage is being done, it also protects a certain image when it comes to the president. Because for some instances, people have been asking the way the media is reporting when it comes to the issue of Alafala, So we do have those circumstances. It's not only the president. There are some times where we'll see that some journalists or media houses are driving a certain agenda, of which is very dangerous when it comes to informing the public. The media must be free and the media must be fair. But also, political involvement when it comes to media is also very dangerous. Also, funding when it comes to media is very dangerous. So I think those are all the elements, power, money, and influence. Those are all the elements that also disturb the work of the media. Because now and then you'll see those elements of media being, you can see, they are being too soft when it comes to the president, they are being too soft when it comes to so and so. So it's those elements that, as the public, we should also look into and see how can we, as organization like Right to Know, make sure that what is being reported to the public is free and fair and gives citizens an opportunity to make decisions independently. without any agendas or propaganda being driven to them.
And I would, Stembiso is correct. I mean, I'm sure, isn't he? Because, and I like the fact that he touched on the question of ownership. I mean, we've been talking, or there's been disquiet, maybe I should say. You know, people are saying, hey, there's this one stable that is, and I mean, you have seen reports over the past few days as well, that some people say has come out full force to support, you know, the owners in their own campaign, whether it's retaliation, setting the record straight, but something they believe that the publications themselves or the product shouldn't be a reflection of the wishes, you know, or interests of the owners.
I mean, I think this emphasizes why we need to start going back, you know, and I think this day is a perfect day to do that. The mere fact that, number one, when we look historically, being able to report, you know, on issues which people can make informed decisions on was really not there. And I think it highlights, number one, that we need to start going back to why are we there in terms of media, and why is it that it's very important, especially now, to start distancing yourself and to start understanding that when we say independent, we really mean independent. And as I said in the beginning, especially now with, you know, as I said, the rise of mis and disinformation, and knowing that people are always, experiencing an explode of information. How do you expect society to be able to differentiate, you know, from credible information to misinformation when they feel that they can't go to our media? And in actual sense, media is our first credible source that we go to verify information.
Of course, I mean, there's the other side of the coin, you know, taking a stand against your employer, of course, comes at a price. Don't some of us know that? But a quick last point, I mean, Stembiso, because the criticism has not been confined to domestic or political issues as well. When reporting about relations, for example, whether it's state visits or deals struck between South Africa and China or Saudi Arabia, people say, why aren't you asking about these countries' track records, for example? You know?
I think you are right there. This also speaks to the issue of funds, you know, what we have been talking about, the issue of funding, because their interest when it comes to international content relationship. Because if you look at China, China is investing in South Africa. Other countries are also investing in South Africa. So there are certain interests when it comes to covering what is happening or what other governments are doing wrong. I think what will give you a clear story, if you look at the because now we've got a political party funding act, where a political party has to disclose who's funding these political parties. And if you look at the link between these funders who are funding these political parties or who are funding people who are in power, and you look the link between them and who's owning media houses and who's funding media houses, then you will see that there is a problem. And this is one of the reasons why the reporting when it comes to media is not so independent, because of the exchange of funds between these institutions. I think the party disclosures when it comes to funding, it's something that people should look at. It's an eye opener, because you can now make links between where the money comes from.
Yeah, with those issues. Well, unfortunately, that's where we're going to end this conversation. Special thanks to both of you, Stembiso Kulusa from the Right to Know campaign, as well as Nomshado Ngosengulu from Media Monitoring Africa. That's our show for tonight. Do join us again tomorrow evening. Have a great night.